Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Bold and Beautiful today.
Leave my house now. Eric's voice thundered across the Forrester living room, the echo of his fury reverberating off the marble floors and high ceilings like the aftershock of a devastating storm. His usually composed, dignified face, weathered by age but still commanding, was twisted with a fury Taylor hadn't seen in years, perhaps ever. Taylor Hayes, the poised psychiatrist known for her restraint and empathy, stood frozen just beyond the threshold of the grand double doors that led into the heart of the Forrester estate. She had come here with joy, naive perhaps, but joy nonetheless, to share the news that she and Ridge were engaged. Again. It was supposed to be a moment of healing, of coming full circle, of love rekindled after decades of heartbreak and detours. But standing there now, bathed in the golden California afternoon light that spilled through the tall windows, Taylor felt none of that. All she felt was heat. Eric's rage, searing and unrelenting, bore down on her like the desert sun, stripping her of any pretense, any shield. This wasn't just anger, this was betrayal, personal, ancestral, generational. "You have no right," Eric spat, his voice cracking like a whip. "You think you can just walk in here and announce you've trapped Ridge again into one of your little emotional webs? Do you really believe I'm going to stand by and pretend to celebrate this?" Taylor, still clutching the thin, cream-colored envelope that had held a hand-painted engagement announcement card, her idea, naturally, opened her mouth to speak, to explain, to defend, but the words caught like thorns in her throat. "Eric, No," he barked, cutting her off like a slap. "Don't Eric me. Don't you dare come into my house, into Stephanie's house, with this manipulative circus act and expect applause." At the mention of Stephanie Forrester's name, Taylor's breath hitched. It was like resurrecting a ghost she had never wanted to confront in this way. Stephanie had always had a complicated relationship with her, matriarchal, loving at times, but always controlling, always judging. Taylor had been her favorite once, her chosen bride for Ridge, the anti-Brooke. But that was long ago, before time had eroded alliances and love had turned to ashes in too many hearts. "I didn't come here to cause drama, Eric," Taylor said carefully, her voice soft but unwavering. "I came here because I thought you deserved to hear it from me. Ridge and we're in love. We're engaged. This is what we want." Eric gave a dark, bitter laugh that held no humor. "Love? Love? That's what you call this?" He gestured wildly, as if trying to swat away the very concept. "You've been dangling this idea in front of Ridge for decades. Whenever he's weak, whenever Brooke pushes him too far, there you are. Waiting. Patient. Oh, so understanding. You're not a partner, Taylor. You're a contingency plan." Taylor flinched, visibly. "That's not true," she whispered, hurt flashing in her eyes. "Ridge made this choice. We both did." "No," Eric hissed, stepping closer, his eyes narrowing. "You pushed him. You took advantage of his grief over Brooke, over his son, over everything that's fallen apart in his life. And now you're trying to dress it up in romance. But I see it for what it is. You're a vulture." The insult struck like a blow, and Taylor felt her legs nearly buckle. But she stood her ground, trembling, blinking fast. "I loved your son," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I have loved him for so long I've forgotten what life feels like without that love. Yes, we've been through things, terrible, painful things. But Ridge came to me. He found comfort in me. This engagement isn't manipulation, Eric. It's healing. For both of us." Eric's face contorted, and for a moment, Taylor thought she saw sorrow there, buried beneath the layers of anger and grief. But it vanished quickly. "You really believe that, don't you?" he said quietly. "You really think this is about healing? Tell me, Taylor, what about Brooke? What about everything she sacrificed for this family? For me? For Ridge? She fought for that man through every betrayal, every scandal, every time he turned to you out of guilt or confusion. And now you expect me to bless this farce? This has nothing to do with Brooke, Taylor replied, her voice rising. This is about Ridge and me. What we want. Not what you want, not what Brooke wants, not what Stephanie would have wanted. Eric's eyes blazed. Everything has to do with Brooke. You think this family forgets? You think I forget how many times you disappeared, how many times you ran from your problems while Brooke stayed, fought? Ridge may have had his doubts, his flings, but deep down, it was always her. And now you're standing here, smug, waving this engagement around like it means something. Like it's not just a placeholder until he runs back to her again. Taylor's face went white, but she did not look away. That's cruel, she said simply. Even for you. What's cruel is you standing in my living room pretending you belong here, Eric snarled. You don't. You never did. You were a moment, Taylor. A chapter. But Brooke is the book. She's the legacy. You want to marry Ridge? Fine. But don't expect this family to embrace it. Don't expect me to celebrate. And don't you dare come here looking for my blessing. I didn't ask for your blessing, Taylor said, lifting her chin. I asked for respect. Well, you're not getting that either, Eric growled. Now get out. Leave my house now. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Taylor stood there for a beat longer, tears welling but not falling. She turned slowly, dignity clinging to her like a fragile veil, and walked toward the door. As her hand reached for the brass handle, she paused. You can hate me, Eric, she said without turning around. But one day, you'll see that this love, this version of Ridge and me, it's real. Whether you approve or not. And with that, she left. Eric stood motionless in the center of the room, heart pounding, hands trembling slightly. He looked up at the massive Forrester portrait above the fireplace, Stephanie's face frozen in stoic, eternal judgment. What would you say? He whispered bitterly. But the room, like Stephanie's portrait, gave no answer. Taylor rushes Ridge to the altar, ignoring warning signs. Nothing will stop Taylor Hayes and Ridge Forrester from getting married, as she is sending out save the dates and reserving her wedding venue. No one on the CBS soap opera wants to inform Taylor that her fiancé might change his mind and not attend the wedding. Is Tridge going to say I do? To find out, continue reading. Below are spoilers for what will happen next on BNB. Yes, Ridge Forrester replied. Instead of waiting for her ex-husband to pop the question, Taylor Hayes grabbed the initiative and proposed to Ridge Forrester. Her initiative impressed Ridge, who agreed to her suggestion. However, BNB teasers indicate that Taylor will be far more eager to choose a date than her fiancé. Before she loses Ridge to Brooke Logan once more, Taylor is desperate to lock him down, but she is approaching the situation incorrectly. Forcing a man to marry you generally backfires, and it will probably in this instance, as any seasoned soap opera watcher is aware. Taylor intends to begin sending out save the dates and invites shortly after their engagement. However, she will find it difficult to persuade her fiancé to agree on a date or location. Envious Ridge Forrester Green. Ridge Forrester will be going crazy because Brooke is seeing his half-brother Nick Marone once more, while Taylor Hayes is attempting to organize a wedding without the groom. Online rumors suggest that Brooke's reconnection with Nick may be a sophisticated ruse to force Ridge to call off the wedding, and if so, it appears to be succeeding. Taylor Hayes had always been a woman of conviction, resilience, and romantic idealism, which in itself wasn't necessarily a flaw, unless, of course, that romantic idealism turned into blind faith so fierce that it steamrolled over common sense, friendly warnings, and glaring red flags that practically waved in her face like a matador daring her to charge. Yet here she was, in the middle of the Forrester mansion, swiping through Pinterest boards with wedding planners, debating between peony or orchid centerpieces, while the man she insisted was her destiny was visibly spiraling into a state of emotional turmoil every time the name Brooke Logan fluttered through the air like the scent of expensive perfume that lingered far too long. Everyone close to Taylor, Steffi, Thomas, even the perpetually neutral Carter, saw what was happening, but no one dared tell her the full truth. Ridge Forrester was not ready to get married. He wasn't ready to commit. He wasn't even sure what flavor of coffee he wanted in the mornings, let alone what woman he wanted to spend forever with. But Taylor, heart still tethered to the golden days of their whirlwind past, saw what she wanted to see, a man who said yes to her proposal, a man who looked good in tuxedos, and a man she could rescue from the clutches of the ever-enigmatic Brooke. And so, she raced against time, scribbling dates in a planner, calling in favors from fashion designers, asking Eric Forrester for use of the mansion's garden, oblivious to the widening chasm between reality and the fantasy she was so determined to manifest. Ridge, for his part, had accepted her proposal not out of excitement but out of something much murkier, guilt, exhaustion, a desire for stability in a life that was anything but. He'd just ended things with Brooke, again, and Taylor had been there, understanding, loving, open. The thought of hurting her again was unbearable. But commitment? That was a heavy word, and every time Taylor talked about floral arrangements or guest lists, Ridge's thoughts drifted, to the sound of Brooke's laugh, to the way she and Nick Marone were smiling at each other across Il Giardino's patio, to the way she always had the power to infuriate him and intoxicate him all at once. And he was jealous. Oh, was he jealous? The moment he caught wind of Brooke and Nick reconnecting, something primal ignited in him, and suddenly his engagement to Taylor didn't feel so much like a fresh start as it did a premature finish line he was forced to stumble across before the real race ever began. Yet Taylor remained willfully blind. When Ridge forgot to meet the wedding planner, she chalked it up to stress. When he looked distant during their cake tasting, she blamed the traffic. When he stared too long at his phone during their ring fitting, clearly reading Brooke's social media post of her and Nick boating along the coast, she simply smiled and changed the subject. Every day, more signs mounted. Thomas, riding the roller coaster of his own conscience, considered telling his mother the truth, that Ridge's heart wasn't entirely in it, but the weight of his own mistakes made him hesitate. Steffi urged caution too, suggesting they take things slow, that maybe Ridge needed time. But Taylor, emboldened by the ring on her finger and the idea that persistence equaled permanence, pressed harder. The wedding was set. The save the dates were printed in gold foil and mailed. The dress, custom, flawless, expensive, was delivered to her home in a garment bag that whispered promises of fairy tale endings. Behind the scenes, the sabotage began. Whispers started leaking from Brooke's camp, subtle nudges, quiet mentions to Ridge of what they had, of the years that no one could erase. Brooke didn't say she wanted Ridge back, not directly. But she didn't have to. She smiled a certain way, touched his arm with practiced delicacy, brought up memories with the casual elegance of someone who knew she still lived rent-free in his mind. And Nick? Oh, Nick played along. Whether he truly wanted Brooke again or was doing it as a favor to her, or to irk Ridge, didn't matter. The photos were being seen. The narrative was spinning. Ridge began missing wedding meetings altogether. When confronted, he said all the right things. He was overwhelmed, busy with Forrester business, needed space, but Taylor never let him finish those thoughts. It's okay, she'd say, silencing his hesitation with a kiss, ignoring the cloud behind his eyes. We're in this together. And so, the train sped forward. The guest list ballooned to hundreds. The media was tipped off. Steffi tried one last time to intervene. "Mom," she said gently one afternoon, "are you sure this is what he wants?" But Taylor brushed her daughter off. "I know, Ridge. I know what we have." Even as she said the words, doubt tried to wiggle into her mind, but she cast it out. She'd already sent the invites. She'd already booked the string quartet. She'd made a public declaration, and to turn back now would be humiliation on a grand scale. And so, the wedding grew into a public spectacle. People from every corner of Los Angeles's glittering elite were preparing to attend. Paparazzi lined up, already speculating if Brooke Logan would cause drama on the big day. Brooke, for her part, hadn't RSVP'd. But her presence, or lack thereof, was felt in every room Ridge entered. Then came the rehearsal dinner. Ridge arrived late, distracted, unshaven, and when Taylor pulled him aside to express concern, he gave her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes and said, "We're going to be fine." But Taylor, having memorized every expression he'd ever worn, knew something was off. That night, she stared at her reflection in the mirror and whispered, "Don't ruin this. Don't push." But the harder she tried to calm herself, the louder the alarm bells rang. And yet, she chose silence. She put on the veil the next morning and walked down the grand staircase of the Forrester mansion to a sea of smiling faces. But Ridge wasn't at the altar. Not yet. He was in his car, driving. Not away. Not forward. Just driving. The tuxedo hung from the backseat. The vows, scrawled on a notepad, sat forgotten in the glove compartment. He drove past the beach house, past Il Giardino, past Brook Street. He stopped once, considered knocking on her door, but didn't. Instead, he sat at the wheel, letting the memories wash over him. He thought of Taylor, warm, dependable, loyal, and then of Brooke, chaotic, maddening, unforgettable. He didn't know what he wanted. That was the problem. But standing at an altar promising forever to a woman he wasn't sure he could love the way she deserved felt cruel. So he waited. And Taylor stood waiting, veil fluttering, heart racing, smile fixed in place as every second passed with no Ridge in sight. Whispers began. Murmurs in the crowd. Thomas went pale. Steffi reached for her mother's hand. Carter checked his watch. Then, finally, the door creaked open. Ridge entered. But the look on his face wasn't joyous or apologetic. It was haunted. He walked toward her, every step feeling like betrayal. And before anyone could say a word, he reached for her hand and whispered, "I'm sorry." Taylor's breath caught. The world around her blurred. She wanted to scream, to ask why, but deep down, she already knew. She'd always known. The red flags were never subtle. She'd chosen to see them as pink. She'd ignored the signs, silenced the warnings, outrun the doubts. But the truth always catches up. As guests awkwardly shuffled away and murmurs turned to full-blown gossip, Taylor stood in silence, eyes dry, heart shattered. Ridge didn't run to Brooke, not that day. He disappeared, perhaps into his own regrets, perhaps into a world where he wouldn't have to choose. Taylor, left with a bouquet and 1,000 unanswered questions, finally saw the full picture. Love couldn't be forced. Timing couldn't be manufactured. And some fairy tales were just reruns of past heartbreaks in a different dress. Ridge Forrester is overcome with jealousy. Since Ridge Forrester accepted Taylor Hayes' proposal and the two became legally engaged, all eyes are on him, on the bold and the beautiful. Ridge Forrester wearing a ring and going to the altar to say "I do" are two completely different things, though. Before Ridge and Taylor's big wedding day, will his jealousy get the better of him? Read on to find out. Here are some spoilers for what will happen next on Bold and Beautiful. Brooke, Ridge isn't over. However, Taylor Hayes believes she has defeated Brooke Logan and that her fight is done. She is unaware, however, that she has yet to secure her ex-husband. The return of Nick Marone might seriously disrupt Taylor's wedding arrangements. Spoilers for Bold and Beautiful indicate that Taylor will be excited to decide on a wedding date and organize the lavish ceremony. She will begin to see that her husband is somewhat distracted and more anxious about his half-brother having an affair with his ex-wife than he is about choosing a location and creating a wedding gown. For what length of time will Taylor continue to believe that she is engaged to Ridge? Everyone else in the family will be able to tell that Ridge Forrester is being slow and envious of Brooke and the captain. According to BNB previews, Ridge is only going to become cold-hearted as Brooke pushes her new romance in his face. Does Taylor call off her wedding? Does Taylor really want to marry someone who is still in love with another woman, even if she is successful in getting Ridge to say "I do" this summer? Is Ridge on his way to the Heartbreak Hotel, or will he be able to conceal his jealousy from Taylor? All eyes in Los Angeles are fixed on Ridge Forrester as the world-renowned fashion designer makes headlines not for a bold new couture collection but for his unexpected engagement to the brilliant and ever-gracious Dr. Taylor Hayes. For longtime viewers of The Bold and the Beautiful, Ridge's romantic life has always been as dramatic and unpredictable as the fashion shows he orchestrates at Forrester Creations, but his recent decision to recommit to Taylor has everyone, friends, family, and fans alike, holding their breath. While Taylor celebrates what she believes is a long-overdue reunion, there's a storm brewing beneath Ridge's charming smile and perfectly tailored suit, a tempest of unresolved feelings and bitter jealousy that threatens to derail not only his engagement but also his already fragile emotional stability. Ridge has always worn his heart on his sleeve, and while he tries desperately to convince himself that choosing Taylor over Brooke is a new chapter in his life, the truth is far more complicated. Ridge Forrester isn't over Brooke Logan. And what's more, he can't stand the thought of anyone else having her. Especially not his old rival, Nick Marone. The moment news of Nick Marone's return hit town, something in Ridge snapped. Though he tried to mask it behind tight-lipped smiles and half-hearted congratulations, everyone close to him could see the tension in his jaw, the way he avoided eye contact when Brooke's name came up, and how quickly he dismissed Taylor's wedding plans as too soon or not the right time. What Taylor interpreted as normal wedding stress was, in reality, a deep internal struggle between Ridge's loyalty to her and his unyielding possessiveness over Brooke. The irony wasn't lost on his children or his ex-wife. For years, Brooke and Taylor fought tooth and nail over Ridge's affections, only for Ridge to now be emotionally unavailable to both, trapped in a psychological tug-of-war of his own making. Taylor began eagerly planning the ceremony. She wanted something classic yet whimsical, something that would reflect their complicated yet beautiful history. She asked Ridge for his input, hoping to include him in everything from the guest list to the flower arrangements, but Ridge remained distant. He'd excuse himself from meetings with vague mumblings about deadlines at the office or last-minute fashion emergencies that needed his attention. But in reality, Ridge was lurking in the background, watching Brooke and Nick reconnect, each interaction between them fueling a growing fire of jealousy that was rapidly spinning out of control. Taylor tried to hold it together. She reminded herself that Ridge had chosen her. She was the one he proposed to. She was the woman he loved now, not the Brooke of the past. But the signs were becoming impossible to ignore. When Ridge wasn't checking Brooke's social media or asking Hope offhand questions about her mother's whereabouts, he was snapping at Taylor for small things, projecting his frustration and confusion onto their relationship. It wasn't long before their engagement felt less like the fairy tale she had envisioned and more like a high-stakes poker game in which one wrong move could cost her everything. The last straw came when Ridge stormed out of a romantic dinner after seeing a photo of Brooke and Nick on a yacht, smiling like two high school sweethearts. Taylor, wearing a new silk gown she had picked out for their honeymoon, was left alone at the restaurant with a cold steak and colder realization. Ridge wasn't just jealous, he was obsessed. Back at Forrester Creations, whispers of Ridge's volatility began spreading like wildfire. His colleagues noticed his temper flaring during meetings, his designs reflecting a dark and brooding mood unlike anything they'd seen before. Even Eric Forrester, a pillar of wisdom in the family, pulled Ridge aside and asked him if he was truly ready to marry Taylor, or if he was just trying to escape the reality of losing Brooke. Ridge, ever the master of deflection, denied any lingering feelings, but the guilt in his eyes betrayed him. Meanwhile, Brooke continued to live her life unapologetically. Having spent decades tangled in Ridge's emotional roller coaster, she had finally reached a place of inner peace, or so she thought. Her new relationship with Nick was refreshing and uncomplicated, and she had no intention of using it to provoke Ridge. But that didn't stop Ridge from interpreting every smile, every affectionate glance, as a personal attack.